Transportation and Commerce Committee meeting to order. Could you please take the roll?
Alderman Boyd,
Present.
Alderman Moore, Alderman Vaccaro,
Present.
Alderman Cone,
Present.
Alderman Muhammad, Alderman Oldenburg,
Present.
Alderwoman Middlebrook,
Present.
Chairwoman Davis,
Present.
Alderman Moore, Alderman Muhammad. You have 6 present.
Thank you. I'd like to,
Where's the quorum? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a
6 is a quorum. Okay, I didn't.
Probably was decided.
so that was one of the things I wanted to bring down. So, the attorney didn't do the things we asked him to do and changing it like that. So let's start our meeting. Do we have some excuse alderpersons?
Yeah, Alderman Moore and Muhammad have asked to excuse.
Okay, thank you. And then I'd like to review the minutes from the last, so no action was taken on the May 15th meeting minutes, and you do have those now before you. Have you had an opportunity to read them?
If you're taking a motion, I'll make one to approve the minutes.
Second.
It's been moved and second to accept the minutes from our May 15th meeting.
June 6th.
Well, I'm looking at May 15th. That's what I'm trying to, because we didn't take action on those before.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So should we make a motion?
So I'd like to have a motion for the May 15th minutes, because we didn't have them before us at the last meeting, and now we do. And I'd like to go ahead and get those passed before we go to the next set.
What if we make a motion to accept all the previous minutes? Then we'll cover them both. So I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay, but that's not an appropriate motion,
It's
and I
not.
won't accept it.
Okay, well then I won't make it.
Thank you.
So we try it. I thought I'd try it.
All right.
I move that we approve the May 15th, 2019 meeting.
And I'll
minutes.
second that.
Thank you very much. Do we have to do a roll call? So we shall do one.
Alderman Boyd,
Aye.
Alderman Moore, Alderman Vaccaro,
Aye.
Alderman Cone,
Aye.
Alderman Muhammad, Alderman Oldenburg, Alderman Middlebrook,
Aye.
Chairwoman Davis,
Aye.
Alderman Moore, Alderman Muhammad. You have 6 aye votes.
Thank you. We have approved our minutes from May 15th. Now we have before us the minutes from the June 6th meeting. And before I ask for a motion, I see several things that I believe should be added to the minutes. And I shall consult here with the clerk as I give my concerns. One is on action items that are requested by members of the committee, they should be included in our minutes. So for Board Bill 19, I know that that we asked for the correct information to be put in this board bill, because it refers to 2012 instead of 2018. And then it was also Alderman Vaccaro had asked to have his name added to this bill as a sponsor. And there's one other thing, not jumping out at me like it did at 2 o'clock this morning. Let's see. Oh, and so after Attorney Bush, the city councilor, spoke about his suggestions on, well, rather his legal opinion, which he said it was questionable at that moment. He would go back and review it more. I think that needs to be clarified because it wasn't an absolute.
So noted, we can go to it.
Okay, anybody else have anything? Hearing no other concerns, Chair accepts a motion.
I moved.
Do we need the updated minutes before we make the motion then?
We do. Okay,
Yeah,
so,
we can get them to you by the next meeting.
okay, that'll be fine. We'll handle it at the next meeting then. Okay, all right. So now, the first item on our agenda for today, and I'm gonna tell you something, I don't know if it's in our rules, but on most boards I sit on, we approve our agenda.
Right, it's not in the,
It's not in our rules. Okay, I just wanted to check.
but no, should be.
Okay. So the first board bill for review is Board Bill number 19. Alderman, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and members of the Transportation and Commerce Committee. Board Bill 19, as you know, is calling for a public vote should the city decide to move forward with the privatization of our airport. I've given a lot of testimony to this committee over the last year, so I will save the bulk of what I've said before instead of rehashing it. But what I'd like to do instead is commend the director of our airport, who is here with us today, and go over some of the stats of the airport that may or may not be known to the members of the committee. 2018 was the first year since St. Louis Lambert lost its hub status that we had more outgoing local travelers than we have had in the last 2 decades. In fact, we had over 5.6 million local passengers from St. Louis leaving our airport, which is we've surpassed our 2000 numbers last year, which is really quite remarkable. The airport has been growing every single year for the last several years, and over the last 10 years, we've seen a 20% increase in St. Louis's total outbound passengers. This is under local control, our local leadership here in St. Louis. And so I think that's really commendable. I think we ought to be celebrating the leadership we have at our airport and the incredible success that we've had. St. Louis was recently given the distinguishment of having been the only airport to completely have lost its hub status by losing TWA and having regained a hub site status with another carrier, Southwest. That is quite remarkable, to be the only airport to have completely rebound from that sort of devastating loss. And so we're really lucky to have our airport improving at the rate at which it's improving, especially considering our regional economy, which during that exact same time frame has stagnated and not moved forward at all. The importance of Board Bill 19 in involving the general public could not be overstated. You know, as we've talked about before, the only airport on mainland United States that has gone private in New York has subsequently reverted back to public ownership. That is because the private operator pulled out of that agreement, their choice to pull out of that privatization agreement, and that cost the local taxpayers almost $80 million to recoup that, and that is just a jump start. It was $74.5 million that it cost those local taxpayers, according to local news reports in that area. So privatization of our airport, our largest city municipal asset, is really putting our tax dollars in a significant amount of risk. And for that reason, I think that we owe the general public the ability to weigh in on what we as a city decide to do with our airport. This bill does not set forth a date for a vote, and that is for good reason, and that is to give respect to those who are looking to potentially engage in a privatization agreement with the city. We do not know the timeline for moving that forward, therefore we cannot decide when we'll have enough information to put before the general public for an educated vote. But what this bill does say is that we will have a public vote. City Council weighed in that there may be a question as to whether or not that vote could be binding. And that is a matter that could be decided by the courts, of course. However, regardless of whether or not it is binding, a public vote would, of course, be advisory to all of us in this room who have the capacity to vote on the Board of Aldermen and vote on a bill on behalf of our citizens and our taxpayers. So whether or not it would be binding, it of course would be a good idea to take a general vote and be advised what the general public wants to see with their largest publicly owned asset. And with that, Madam Chairwoman, I'll take questions and defer to the committee on action on the board bill.
Okay. Why don't we start with Alderman Brown?
Sure, thank you. I support the bill. I love our airport. I just have one question for the director.
For the
about
what?
the director,
Oh,
for the
sure.
director about our airport. Or we go ahead, Rhonda, if you don't mind, and just tell everybody who you are, Rhonda, please.
Rhonda Homney-Briggy, I'm the Director of our St. Louis Lambert International Airport.
What international flights leave St. Louis?
What international flights? We have the Canada flights in and out of Toronto, and then we have 5 different Caribbean markets. So we have Cancun, Montego Bay, and some of them float. I think right now it's Costa Rica, Puerto Vallarta, and Punta Cana, but some of those float depending on the Apple charters. So Cancun and Frontier, Southwest and Frontier have daily Cancun service year-round, and then Air Canada has the 3 a daily to Toronto. And then the other international activity comes with Apple Vacations, and those are flown by a variety of different vendors.
And those are direct flights?
Yes, nonstop.
I remember when I was a kid growing up, we were known as International Airport, and we had military flights on our. Do we have any military flights that go out? They call them hops back in the day.
Sure, we still have military aircraft all the time and military activity. So it's not scheduled. It's, we accommodate it when we get calls from the military, but we do see military activity both in terms of passengers moving military-wise as well as cargo military.
Okay. Are you familiar with the hops, right?
Yeah.
Does that still go on?
It's a different program than what it used to be. So I don't know, I don't believe it's referred to anymore as that, but we still do see military activity.
Okay. Do you know who I could talk to about those?
No,
We'll
but-
talk offline.
Okay.
but- Okay. Well, thank you. And I do appreciate the job that you do out there. And I think we all on the committee should have parking pass, so we don't have to get on those little special tickets. Thank you, Rhonda.
You're welcome.
For clarity, that's not part of the board bill. Although I have taken those direct flights to Cancun and through Apple.
Yeah.
It's really nice.
Okay. Why don't you stay there, because there might be more questions for you.
Okay.
Okay. Next, Alderman Vaccaro.
Yeah, and I think I expressed my feelings last time, and I'm going to vote for it. I do think the problems are going to be the challenges. I'm glad to see that, you got a charter change, and I know that you agreed to work with Megan and the one that we have. So I have concerns about it, but certainly I put my name on it, and I'm fine with it. I just have a lot of concerns with it.
I appreciate that, and I will like to be on the record to say that I'll support your bill.
Right. We're just going to I think the charter change is the way to solve
I agree, and
everything.
I'll be with you on that.
Okay. Alderman Collins.
No questions.
Okay. Alderman Oldenburg.
Thank you, Alderwoman. What were those, can you just repeat those stats earlier?
Sure, we can pass
off
this
about
around if you'd like.
TWA's vacancy and Southwest replacing,
Yes.
whatever that was.
I think that Director Homdenberg would be better at speaking to these
Sure,
than
maybe
I
she can
would.
corroborate your stats.
Well, I can because I got them directly.
Well, there you go.
That was a good place to get them. I guess according to Traffic and Trend Review in 2018, St. Louis has the distinction of being the only airport to have completely lost a major airline hub, TWA, and having regained the hub site status with another carrier being Southwest Airlines.
And Alderperson, that was last year, the FAA deems that if 25% of your traffic is connecting on a single carrier, then that is a hub status. And so when you look at with the growth of Southwest and the growth of the connecting traffic, that has pushed us to that 25% mark of connecting traffic. And so that's where that FAA status came from. And I think the report that she's referring to came out from one of the industry analysts who quoted that in his report of year-end passenger trends and where that's coming. And on the local market, the peak year of our hub was 2000. And last year, we actually exceeded the number of local passengers than we did in the peak year of the TWA hub. So I think that is a pretty important statistic. I think some of that is that we have a very strong support right now from the business community, and obviously the overall economy, I think, from a business perspective was strong last year. So we saw great support from the business community allowing their employees to travel for meetings versus maybe doing some of the other opportunities like videoing or web chatting or webinars. So I think that's been a huge piece. But to see the number of local passengers actually exceed the number of local passengers during our peak year of the hub was a pretty important stat.
Got it. So it was the 25% kind of threshold that really puts you into being considered a hub status, but more importantly, underscoring that local passengers exceeded where we were in our peak in the early 2000s with TWA.
That's correct.
Wow. Okay. Great.
I can share this with you. I'll just pass it around. Please excuse the coffee stains, but we get you an electronic version without them.
Great. That's perfect. I have no further questions.
All right, sir. Alderwoman Middlebrook.
I have no questions.
Okay. I just have a couple, just for clarity. So, let me give a whole lot of clarity first, and then I'll go to this bill. Our airport has the ability to be a super airport based on the work that has been done, most especially the last 10 years, and how we sit in the market now. So there's no doubt that our airport will continue to thrive. It may thrive at different levels depending on how much money we have to invest, how much opportunity we get through CAP and other things, and how you gain money to invest in different things, how the airlines continue to have the best concern for our airports, and that's another biggie that we have in our favor. Our airlines really do want to be here, and they want to assist us in moving forward in the best way possible. So that's another good thing for our airport. So no one questions that. No one has anything ill to say about management because it has been outstanding, and I do believe it will continue to be outstanding under any circumstances that we find ourselves in the future because they know what they're doing. There's no doubt about that. People like me who are extremely critical, when I say good things, people know I mean it because it's hard to get that out of me because I just nitpick. I can't help myself. That's who I am. That's how I was born. But I found a lot of good things that have happened, most especially in the last 3 years, irregardless to the economy. What was that, in 16? Kind of dropped a little bit. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But that had nothing to do with the operations of the airport. I want to clear that up because I think a lot of people have put some misinformation out here that this exploration process is targeting the management, and it is absolutely not doing that. It is a process that's used just like you would look at your home if you were going to take out a second mortgage and you wanted to do some improvements. That's all it is. And if it doesn't look right, if the numbers are not right, then you don't do it. If all the things that are required in this process are not right, you don't do it. And I've said that a number of times. I've walked away from the table once already. I don't have a problem walking away again if it's necessary to get people to understand that we will do this right. I'm just looking to see what is there. It's an exploration process. And I don't think most people understand that part of it. It has been, misinformation got out ahead of what was really going on, saying that we were going to sell the airport, which is not possible under the law. You can't sell the airport. I also wanted to share with you that as we continue to move forward, we appear to be going down another road of confusion. And so that's where I get to Board Bill 19. So we were asked to clear this up, to clean it up. And the sponsor spoke with the attorney in the committee meeting, and they agreed to do that. And it's still not done. We asked that the last time, and it still wasn't done. I'm not going to take a vote on something that doesn't have the correct information in it. And until that's done, there's no reason to do that. The second part to this is, and I need to ask, and I'm going to ask the clerk how I officially go about this. There's another bill. I don't know if it was first read last week or the week before, but there's another bill, right, that you're currently sponsoring, referring to a vote from the public.
Madam Chairwoman, yeah, the second bill at the request of one of the committee members was to look at a charter change that would require a vote of the people before a vote on privatization. So it's a little more of a long process. So a charter amendment change to require a public vote in the event that we privatize the airport would require a vote first. You know, as a charter change is required to have a public vote.
Okay. So
So that is a second way of doing it. It is a
Okay.
longer way of doing it.
but that's what the attorney was referring to, but he didn't want to give an absolute opinion at that moment.
And he didn't, you're
He
right.
did.
He did say that this ordinance could be challenged, and my response to that, which I was unable to give at that particular hearing, was that while there is a possibility that this ordinance could be considered or determined to be, that the vote would be non-binding, it would be advisory, certainly, to the deliberative body here, the Board of Aldermen, who would ultimately have a say by way of a vote on the privatization of the airport. So again, if the attorney, if it is determined that the public vote is non-binding, it would exist in an advisory role to the Board of Aldermen. Would you like me to repeat that, or kind of
Oh,
maybe say it in a
absolutely
different
not.
way? Okay.
I'm exactly where I was.
Sure.
So, what I'd like to do is to ask for the other board bill to be assigned as soon as possible to committee. And again, I'm not sure because I didn't pay it. I was busy last week, so I don't know if it was just first read last week or the week before, but it needs to be assigned to committee. We need to get this bill cleaned up, and/or you make a decision on what it is that you're trying to do. Because to me, there's a conflict here, and
The bills are not in conflict. They can happen simultaneously and both be passed by the Board of Aldermen without conflict. The ordinance requiring a vote could certainly be passed by the Board of Aldermen, giving the public assurance that we would have a vote in the event that we would have the airport privatized. The charter amendment change could also be put before voters at a determined time, say the next general election, which is quite some number of months from now. Those two things can happen simultaneously without conflict. So I'm happy to entertain them both and move them both forward. And I think they both have merit, and they both have utility, and they both have assurances to the general public.
Yes, sir.
Just a question. So, if 19, we passed 19 out on it, it would require a special election.
That's not exactly true.
The
Board,
next election isn't until the same time, I'm just, and I'm trying to, I'm just in my own mind.
We don't have another
So the
one.
next election isn't, the same election that we could do a charter amendment would also be equal to the same as this one, or either one or both would require a special election?
I am unaware of the timeline that the privatization process
Well,
is moving forward. So it is unknown to me at this point when we're going to have an offer, so to speak, or an RFP. We cannot put, under Board Bill 19, we cannot put anything before the voters until we have a proposal for them. And I, like many, unless somebody from the committee can clarify when we're going to have the RFP, which is something I think we could all benefit from knowing, but I don't think we have the facts
We
at
don't know
this
that as a
point.
committee. 'Cause
Right.
we haven't even put out an RFQ yet.
Well, no,
So from that perspective, we don't know.
But let's just say, for, just, I'll throw a number out. So in June of next year, they decide they may try to do this.
Yes.
Okay, I know it's not a real date. Then we would have to put together language for ballot language and hold a special election. Wouldn't that be the same as the charter amendment would require, like, I mean, either one, wouldn't it be about the same timeline?
That could be the case, you're right. That could be the case.
I was in my own, that's all, I was just curious.
You're right, that could be the case. And I think the possibility of having a special election does exist. If, for example, we move forward more quickly and as an effort to move the privatization forward, it is desired by those who are keen to want to privatize the airport, that they would like to move this along faster, they could, for example, call a special election. But the ordinance is just a hypothetical in this
No,
case.
I
It would be
understand.
very similar to saying, if we decided to sell City Hall, we would first put it before the voters.
I understand.
And that doesn't mean that we're planning on selling City Hall, that we have any timeline to do it, or that we're even entertaining it. Much in the same way, the privatization of the airport at this point is still hypothetical, and we don't have a timeline, we don't have a plan, we don't have any,
I
details
understood
to
all that,
put
but I
before
just
the
thought,
voters.
I was just trying to clear it in my own head, but I thought it would be the same.
it could be,
Timeline.
it could be,
That-
it could be, that's correct. I agree with that.
Okay, you.
No, I'm done.
Oh, yes,
I'm
sir.
just curious.
And,
Alderman Boyd,
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback on Alderman Vaccaro, I would think that if we have to have a special election, I would appreciate those who are bringing forth the idea would pay for it so that it doesn't come out of our general revenue.
Pay for the,
Pay for the
Yes.
special election, so
The-
somewhere within the ordinance or somewhere within
I could
the
agree with that.
proposal, they
That's a
would
good
need to
idea.
have to agree to pay for the special election.
but if we're roundtabling a little bit, what if they say no?
Well, then
I mean, they say, well, we're not gonna pay
Well,
for it, so
then I think it would die. If we say that we want to have the voters vote on it, and they say they're not going to pay for it, then the voters not going to vote on it. So
and
there
you're
you go.
saying they, the people
The
who.
people who put the proposal for us to privatize.
Okay,
Well-
I guess my confusion, so we put in the bill that they would have to pay for the special election. But what if they say, well, we're not gonna pay for the special election, then that election doesn't take place, then the privatization moves on without a
No,
vote?
it does not. If we say that you cannot enter into a lease agreement with the
Without a vote.
airport without a
Okay.
vote of the people, that is what it is. And if we say, if you propose this, you must pay for a special election,
and that's a different
and they
deal.
say, I'm not gonna pay for a special election, then it's dead.
Yeah, but that's a different
And I like
bill, that's
that.
not what we had
And I think
before.
we're
No,
within
I-
our
I-
power
and-
to.
I know
to
that's
do
not
that.
what's before us, but I
I
just
I
thought this
like
was a
that.
Sure.
I'm
No,
just
sir,
having
I
a
agree.
conversation.
I agree.
I
You
like
know, so
that.
that if we can make, whether it's this bill, another bill, a whole different bill, I think that is something we should certainly consider so that we won't be on the hook for paying for a special election.
This bill doesn't require that the city pays for it. This bill simply.
No, I agree.
And you know, honestly, we don't know what private operator is going to offer the city. That is part of the negotiations that's going to take place between SLDC and the consultants and the airlines, et cetera. And that needs to be baked in. You know, we've seen reports that the consultants are currently getting paid somewhere in the ballpark of $800,000 a month. We have contracts that total outward payments of $675,000 on retainers right now. So, you know, to hold a special election would cost a couple $100,000, would be really pennies in the bucket compared to what the consultants are already dishing out for this effort. And I would hope, much like you, that that would be covered by the consultants, and certainly not in the negotiations that the city is participating in, that the city would agree to do that. That would really be a disservice, I think, to taxpayers.
I like your idea, Joe.
And if you'd like to add that to the bill, we could consider doing that.
No, I'm
I will.
not suggesting that right now. I just wanted to throw that out there
I like
for
that.
consideration.
I would agree.
If it would make, you know, committee members feel better, or even, you know, the members of the board as a whole feel
Sure.
better. I just want to offer that out, that's all.
I like that.
Alderman Carl?
I still don't have any questions or comments.
Okay. We good.
But Madam Chairperson, I do need clarity again, because you're real clear on we cannot by law sell the airport.
No.
But we can by law lease the airport, can't we?
We could.
Okay, so leasing the airport in my mind is no different than selling it per se, because.
We could lease the management of the airport, but the physical airport is different. Am I not right?
And leasing, go ahead.
The lease of the airport, if that were to happen, then the operator would come in and not only have jurisdiction over the operations of the airport, but all the finances of the airport as well.
He would have possessory
And,
rights.
Right.
and if I may,
What was it?
Possessory rights.
But
Right.
and if I may,
Possessory.
Possessory rights, okay.
Okay.
and if I may, one of the provisions of the privatization plan under the Trump administration, it's my understanding that the private operator would also have the power to sell land that is currently owned by the airport at a profit to the private operator. Currently, any real estate transactions that take place, that money would have to fold back into airport operations. Under a privatization agreement, real estate transactions could be made at the profit to the private operator. Am I correct in that?
Real estate transactions, I'm not sure that the actual sale of that land, because I don't, you know, the airport does own the land, and if that land is sold, a good portion of that land was purchased with noise abatement dollars. And if that is ever sold, that's why we've always opted to look at long-term leasing
Leases, right.
of any of our transactions at the airport, because if you sell land that has noise dollars associated with, that gets paid back to the government. So 75, 80%, I forget the exact number, actually gets returned to the federal government because they were the ones who helped pay for that noise program abatement. So I don't believe, it's my understanding, that would change. What would change is that the private operator, if they develop the land, however they choose to either do the development themselves or bring in a developer, obviously all those proceeds would go, all the finances then becomes their control. So wherever the revenue
At the
comes.
end of the day, it's still our airport. The other part to that too is most federal operations, and I say this from experience, with the housing authority, we couldn't sell off land that we owned.
Yeah.
We could give you up to a 99-year lease, but that's federal, and it belonged to the federal government, and we could not sell it off. Just like this airport belongs to really technically the federal government and the city of St. Louis. And there are guidelines there that make it absolutely impossible for you to sell the airport. But in improvements, there's some guidelines that you follow as well, and it's and you use the fancy term banker, Alderman, Alderman.
Possessory rights.
Possessory rights, that's it. But in any case, if there ever was any kind of agreement, in that agreement, we would also have a clause in there that anything that is done, and it's done, that's done to hurt not only the airport, but the city of St. Louis and its operation, we can immediately terminate. So there's nothing there that allows anybody to just take over the airport and do whatever they want to do with our land, our buildings, or anything, without consultation from everywhere from the FAA to the airlines. They all have a say-so always.
Let me ask
So I can clarify that. I just pulled up the FAA guidelines on airport privatization. And as part of this, and this is at the FAS, this is options for Congress. Okay, so under use and sale and lease of proceeds for land, for airports outside of the airport privatization plan, sale or lease proceeds are considered airport revenue and must be used for airport purposes. However, under full privatization, airports can request the Department of Transportation approval to use, sale, or lease proceeds for any non-airport purposes. So it does allow for the sale or lease of land under full privatization, and the proceeds would go to the private operator.
He has
It
to
is
ask for
possible.
permission, and if we say no.
No, it is permission of the Department of Transportation and not permission of the city.
Okay,
Just to be clear.
This is going to become very
FAA has all
convoluted
rights.
because if I'm not mistaken, our charter requires 2/3 of vote of the Board of Aldermen in order to sell real estate. So we will be abdicating our responsibility
And you
to
can't.
this type of transaction with this hypothetical, lease of the airport. And that would, based on what Julian Bush said, that is something we cannot do. And so I'll be curious as to if the federal government can tell us that our local laws and how we govern ourselves on the sale of real estate would trump our city charter.
Well, you would no longer govern the airport, though. The Board of Aldermen wouldn't have governing rights over the airport.
So we give that away, period. They would never have to come get a board bill to do anything. So if parking is $20 a day today, and let's say hypothetically, 2 years from now, there's this private operator, they can make parking $100 a day, and there's nothing we can do about it.
Correct.
That's correct.
Okay.
Now, it would have to make sense to do that. I mean, I'm not saying there's not other parameters that, if they went to that extreme, I think there'd be other pushback from other consumers, but the Board of Aldermen would have no say-so over things of that nature. The governing rights would not be through the Board of Aldermen.
Carriers would also have some consent. to-
FAA would
depending on
definitely
what-
have some
And
say.
I don't know specifically about parking, but
Yeah.
any other changes, right?
Right, I think, the airlines going forward, there would be, if this were to happen, they would have a lease. They, being the private operator, would have a lease with the airlines. And in that use and lease agreement, although it would not come to this board or to ENA for approval, but there would be a lease agreement with the airlines, and the airlines do have control over some of those, because their consumers are the ones that would be impacted. So they would have, they'd have some ability to help say what could be the highest rate used in case of parking or concessions or some other things. But it just would not be through the governing board of ENA and or the Board of Aldermen or Transportation and Commerce.
But to your point, parking, much like we saw in Chicago when that went privatized, the price quadrupled in just a couple of years. You have a sort of a monopoly market on parking in the city of Chicago, much like the airport has somewhat of a monopoly on parking, at least in the general vicinity of the airport. If you want super convenient parking, they do have a monopoly on that. And the consumer drive is not quite as strong as of a balance in situations where you have a quasi-monopoly situation like an airport.
Now, on that Chicago situation, that's another thing. We keep using that in a way that is not totally clear. And so I'd like to have the clarity back to the situation in Chicago. Chicago was their own worst enemy in that process. It was their city government. They were their own worst enemy, and at the end of the day, the privatization process, nor the conclusion of it, had nothing to do with being privatized. And actually, Chicago profited because you don't have to give back any money that they give you. So they kept the hundreds of millions of dollars that they screwed up on by their own mismanagement. So it had nothing to do with the privatization.
I would agree with that. I think to some extent, the idea of privatizing doesn't necessarily have to be used in a negative way. But I do think that the city of St. Louis does have a questionable history in acting in its own best interest sometimes, and we ought to consider bringing in the general public to weigh in, at least on a matter this big. And so I'm hopeful that with Board Bill 19 we can do just that.
I would hope that if that was the case, that the general public spend as many hours as all the rest of us in delving into all this so that they have clear understanding of exactly what is going on.
Well, we do have a pretty educated
How our airport
base.
is run.
I get a lot of very educated communication from the general public on this
Oh,
particular
I'm not saying
issue.
people are not educated on the thought process of what they may or may not want, but I'm saying the factual information. When you talk about, I'm on another board, and it's just a small $3 billion company, but from the outside, it may look a certain way to somebody, but if I'm on the inside and I'm looking at the audit, I'm looking at the financial statements that happen every month, I'm looking at the personnel issues that are going on, I'm looking at the deterioration of the buildings that are there, I'm looking at so many different things in order to come to a conclusion on something. A general person who just walks down the street past the building has no clue.
There's a question I have.
Yes, sir.
If you wouldn't mind. Do we know what percentage of city residents actually utilize the airport? Is there any data captured around that?
We can buy data by zip code. We don't have that specifically, Chairman, or Alderman, but we can, I'm sorry, just elevated you.
I know, I appreciate
Sorry
it.
about that. So we buy data by zip code more to help us understand how far reaching the MSA goes for us.
Yeah.
So our people from Illinois coming, Cape Girardeau, Springfield, so we don't, anything within the local MSA, we don't break out and look at that. I mean, I guess I probably could, but in general, the thought population is, there's 350,000 people in the city of St. Louis. Obviously, on an annualized basis this year, we're going to have 8 million enplanements locally. So, it's a smaller percentage, obviously, of the total population
Sure.
base that uses the airport.
We can get that data for you based
Yeah.
on.
I don't know, Alderman,
yeah.
if you've done, if there's been any survey or anything around.
It's a very small
just how many
percentage,
percentage
yeah.
of city residents actually.
Yeah,
use it.
County residents use it way more than city residents use it.
The airport functions not only to provide travel options to individuals, but it's really an important piece of the overall economy of
Sure.
our region. And while many of our residents may not use it on a regular basis, certainly the companies they work for, their employers, and others that are using the airport to drive economic activity in our region that serves every resident in the city of St. Louis by creating jobs and creating an atmosphere of economic success.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, I think it's always important to err on the side of democracy by every stretch of the imagination. But are you at all concerned with the precedent that this sets up? I mean, in terms of making decisions as local lawmakers, we see this out of Jeff City a lot, sort of de facto amendments, constitutional amendments, and deferring to votes as opposed to legislatures digging in and kind of doing the responsibility that they were elected to do. This is an academic conversation,
Sure.
and you can shut it down whenever you need to, but
I
I'm just
think-
wondering if you think it sets up a dangerous precedent. Do we start putting every TIF agreement vote out to the people? Do we start, or is it just in what you would consider an extenuating circumstance?
You know, I think that's a really good question and one worth
Stop
discussing.
signs.
Sure.
Take a vote of the people on those.
We do
I'm
take
just
a vote of the
curious.
Board of Aldermen on those, which I think is quite an over.
Right,
is
and
more
this
than
is my
enough.
point, I'm just setting
Sure.
up to
But in this case, the airport is the single largest physical asset
Mhm.
that the city owns. And not only that, but it serves not only the general public, as we just discussed, but the underlying economy of the St. Louis region. It is an anomaly in and of
I
itself.
would agree with you there.
And its importance. I would not advocate for abdicating all of our responsibilities down here, but when it comes to something as important as our airport, which, you know, as I mentioned, is our taxpayers' single biggest asset, I think that really deserves some good rigorous public discourse. And because the general public has been so engaged to some extent in questioning the process, and you know, we owe that conversation, I think, to the general public. But do I think we should give every TIF and tax abatement? Absolutely not. You know, we need to we are elected to represent the will of the people that put us here, and we should do the job that we're sent down here to do.
Well, and that's what I don't know if you were at the meeting, but Julian Bush said we cannot delegate even on the airport, even with this.
I saw the
We cannot
transcript.
delegate our authority away that, you know, we can do a non-binding, we can do a charter change, but at no point can we have someone else sit in and, even if I said, can you
No,
have
I'm
my
aware of
neighbor
that.
come in and vote for me at the Board of Aldermen?
I understand.
I can't make it. He was pretty clear on that.
Interesting. The general public, when we use that terminology, can be as true or as idealistic as you choose it to be. So if I talked about my general public that I am privy to deal with, I may have had 5 questions about this process. That might be it. In neighborhood meetings, they said that's why we elected you, and you go do your job and you make the best decisions. Here's what we would like to see. I hear all that a lot. Here's what we would like to see if there was a deal made. People would like to see more money come out of the airport. If there is more money, they'd like to see certain things done, like the streets paved and, you know, all that stuff that they talk about all the time that we never have enough money to do. They'd like to see more money in North St. Louis and portions of South St. Louis, that it's deteriorating so bad that it makes us look bad as a city when people drive down some of our streets. People talk about things like that, but they don't talk about this process because they say that's what we pay you to do. And you better keep your eye on it, and you better make the right decisions. And that's all. If they trust you, they're okay. And so I don't know about anybody else. I mean, when you talk about general public, have you been overwhelmed by concern from the public that you represent? But even here at the Board of Aldermen, we've had other issues where people really did have a lot of concern. And we knew that because they blew up our emails, the phone calls, the letters, everything. And that has not happened in the whole year of this process. So you can keep saying general public.
Madam Chairperson, just so I'm clear on Board Bill 19, what modifications are you asking for?
The appropriate federal information that we're referring to.
And it needs to be inserted where?
Everywhere it says Act of 2012.
We asked our council in the last hearing to please provide that, to update that, reiterated that request to him as we're sitting here. I'm not sure why that wasn't
And we
done.
did it the last time,
I
too.
understand, yeah, we did do that, Madam Chairwoman. I can't speak to why our council didn't provide that, but I will be happy to follow up before the next hearing. Hopefully we can coordinate times to make sure that, you know, that can be done in advance. It's a simple reference to a program. I mean, it's a it
The new
really doesn't.
Privatization Act reads different.
it's just a name, it's just a couple of words, it doesn't, it's not it doesn't pertain to the structure or the meaning or the intent of the bill in any way, shape, or form. It's just referring to a federal, we could even remove the reference entirely. It doesn't relate to the intent or the result of passing the bill.
So,
But I'm happy to reiterate the request to our council to provide that change. Mr. Clerk, if you don't mind following up with him too. We did ask him in the last hearing. I'm surprised it wasn't done.
but let me ask you all, so I be clear. So where it says Modernization and Reform Act 2012, it shouldn't be 2012?
Well, under the Trump administration, that has moved forward and changed in name.
Oh,
And
so
there
it
has
doesn't
been some.
exist anymore?
It does exist, it's been altered. Yeah, I
It's
mean,
a-
it's just a name. I mean, it's
It's a
really
new
just a different name now.
It's a new
I mean,
law for 20
the Trump
years.
administration is looking to expand privatization in a
Okay.
general sense, and airport privatization is one of those areas that our federal government is looking to expand options in. And so there has been a change to the name of that and some expansion of the powers associated with it, again, since 2012, under the current administration.
Right.
It was
doesn't-
initially a pilot program that was limited to whether it was a large hub, medium, or small hub.
yeah.
There was numbers like, could only be one large hub, 2 or 3 medium hubs, and 3 or 4 small hubs. It's no longer a pilot program under the
It's a
new
full
name,
blown
and it no
program.
longer limits the number of airports that can engage in looking at the process.
So the language doesn't change the intent, but it changed the facts?
Not exactly. I mean, it's referring.
Because if the reference, it would be a fact.
Okay.
So people would go out and to look for this reference, right? And then it would not be a valid reference. Would that be correct? Because the name has changed and you're saying it's been expanded and so on and so forth.
Well, I mean, the intent of the
Program
bill
has
is to
changed.
provide a
I'm just trying to
public
be technical.
vote, but yes, we could even remove that whole section and just say that, an ordinance requiring a citywide vote in the event of privatizing St. Louis Lambert International Airport by leasing, blah, 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 period. We did put pursuant to, that was the federal program until the Trump administration changed it. We could, but very easily change just that. It does not change the intent of the bill in any way, shape, or form. But for the general public to be able to reference it, yes. And again, we can clarify with the council to please put in the current reference for the benefit of the general public to look up the current federal guidelines on that.
Okay, let me just do this real quick and I'll go back to you. So let's put clarity to this. It was changed because there was a study done that indicated how much money was required to bring the airports in the United States of America up to a better standard of operating. And more airports were having challenges. And so this pilot program that they talked about, I think they allowed 12 altogether that could have been in that.
I think it was 9.
Was it
actually,
9?
But I could be
Yeah,
wrong.
I think it
I'll
was
check
9
that
or
out.
12.
Yeah.
So after coming up with that data, and I read the whole article, the trillions of dollars that was required to even closely come to bringing the airports to standard, it was realized that these airports needed better opportunities to go and find private money to help them with what they needed to do.
But Madam Chairwoman,
And so it's not about Trump, it's not about him, because I could care less about him, but the program was changed. And so it has a new name, and has new information in it, and I want people to always have the right information.
and we do have 457 current public airports in the United States, and even under the expansion, our airport is the only airport in the country that has applied for that expanded program.
Now, that's not totally true either.
Could we,
It's not totally true.
has there been any other
Not
airport?
totally true. We currently have a number of airports that are operating in some form or fashion of privatization.
But not
Correct.
under this program.
Not under
Chairwoman.
this
Yeah.
program today, but we also now have the last thing I read, we're looking at close to 16 airports that are going to go into a full-fledged privatization opportunity.
The P3s, there's a big difference between the P3 and the privatization program as we know it in this. The P3s take various, maybe sections of your airport, whether it's a,
And we don't know what we're going to do yet either.
Right, but under this program,
Yeah.
your only opportunity under this program is to privatize. It's
Yeah.
not to do a P3. That doesn't mean a P3 couldn't be considered outside of this. But for this particular program that we are engaged in, it is for the privatization.
We are engaged in a process
Right.
that has no conclusion. We may not do anything because it would not have enough value. It would not change what we consider to be significant change. So there would be no reason to do anything. Or we may do something, and it may not include a privatized operation.
Right.
We may do a number of different things. We don't know that yet. Because if somebody is only going to be able to come in here and do 20% of what we need done, then we just have to limp along and figure that out on our own, okay? If somebody's going to come in here and they can only offer me twice of what we receive already annually, then we need to say goodbye. Because there's no reason to change. Those are common sense decisions that must be made in this process. And so we have no idea whether we're going to do anything yet. Because we're not at that point. And we all know that. We're not at that point. We're not even ready to put out, for me, and you know, I'm really on this environmental part too. And they keep playing around with me. They don't know I'm getting angry. And that environmental piece is really important to me. Because you can end up in a situation where there's a ton of money that needs to be spent. And I don't want, in privatization or not, I don't want us to be in that position, okay? So tell me the truth, give me the analysis so I can look at it and evaluate it. So there are a lot of things that we still got to look at. So that's just critical for me. But anyway, I'm confused. I said that up front, and I need to figure all this out. Okay. Anything else? I'm going to schedule a meeting for next week. Would you be available?
Yes, I can.
Good.
I will be tomorrow. Next week is the 4th of July weekend. Or week.
Early in the week.
Early in the week. Sure, I can be available.
Okay. So send me a couple of times, and then I'll send it out to committee so we can make sure we have a quorum.
I appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you for hearing the bill today.
Okay. So what's next?
56.
Board Bill number 56.
All right, good morning,
Good morning.
Transportation and Commerce members. I will be presenting Board Bill 56. I'm the Airport Deputy Director of Finance Administration, Antonio Strong. Last month, the Comptroller's Office presented a draft board bill to sell bonds to complete our pre-approved project for fiscal year 20 and 21. Be happy to report that that transaction did close this morning.
Good.
Yeah. So
You made it.
Yes.
Okay.
So this board bill requests your approval for a public works ordinance to kind of move forward with the projects. We'll release bids and we will commence with the construction or acquire the assets. And so those projects are listed on Exhibit A of your package. The funding sources for the projects include the amounts that are also listed in your package. Approximately $6.5 million from the ADF, Airport Development Fund, and then $23.2 million is the amount from the bond issuance, and the rest of the funding sources will come from airport improvement grants. So at this time, we respectfully request your approval of this draft board bill for a public works improvement program.
We went through a lot on that bill.
Yeah.
But I was glad to see at the airport commission meeting when you made your presentation, it had a lot of good projects in it. So what I'd like to do is to see if any of our members have questions. Alderman Boyd,
No questions.
Alderman, he was just sitting here. Okay. Alderman Oldenburg.
Well, I thought I'd be next.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. Alderman Cara.
No, I have no questions. But I don't think we have enough people to vote on anything, but
What do we need, 4 or 5 for one? 5. Where'd he go? His stuff is still there.
He's probably coming
His
back.
bag is still there too.
He's probably coming back in. I'm just saying, if we're gonna get ready to vote.
Okay, I'll go around and come back, okay? Alderman Oldenburg.
Perhaps in the interest of stalling,
Alright.
I will ask a question maybe. You mentioned that other than the 6.5 and the 23, approximately 23 million, the balance of the sources to execute on this is coming from grants. Have those grants been awarded? Is that cash in hand? Is there a bridge needed or?
So we apply for the grants as the projects come on board. Like if we're getting ready to start one of the projects here, like
Yep.
maybe one is a runway project, as we get ready to start that project, we'll apply for the grant at that point in time.
But we have quarterly meetings with the FAA, and we walk through upcoming projects that we
So
anticipate.
you're on their schedule.
Right, and we
Sounds
get
fast.
a general understanding of, one, what is the pocket of money available? Do these fall within a high priority of theirs? And if it's a one-rate project, one of the things that we have an agreement on is that if the FAA dollars do not come through for a one-rate project, that means they did not deem that it was a security issue or a safety issue, then we would postpone that project until such time they had the money available.
So you don't start construction, obviously?
No,
until
absolutely
you-
not,
you
until
get
we know we've
awarded.
got, right.
Okay.
Because normally we also get design fees
Makes
as
sense.
part of the grant, so, and now they're doing a lot of them as design and construction as one grant.
We recently had that meeting with the FAA, I want to say about April, where they assured us that there was no issues with what we were presenting as projects.
Well, clearly you're doing some design, so you know what it costs, right?
We don't do the design, what we typically do is we have a contract that goes out for bid every 3 years, and right now it's with CMT. They're a design firm that generally deals with runway construction all over the country. So they look at the condition of an existing runway, and they put a dollar amount on that, but it's not necessarily a design. So they're an on-call,
So they put an approximation, but then after you get awarded and move forward, the design solidifies, you understand the exact
that's correct. We
cost
do a
of it.
pre-bid and get all of
Perfect.
that, yes.
Excellent. Very helpful, thank you.
You're welcome.
Very good question, thank you. We'll come back to Alderman Cohen.
I don't have any questions.
All right, I have none, because I've seen it before, so we're good.
Making a motion then?
Yes, sir.
And I'll make a motion, we pass board bill 56, I would do pass
Second.
recommendation.
It's been moved in second to approve Board Bill number 56.
Previous roll.
We haven't had one yet.
Yeah, we did.
It's not here, but all on Middlebrook.
Oh,
Still
okay.
do it. And I'm not.
We did have a we did.
Did we?
Yeah,
did
well,
on
we
the
did
minutes.
vote on the minutes.
You know, you're smart.
I withdraw my objection.
Thank you.
You don't hear that too often, but
Did one.
Okay, so Board Bill number 56 has been moved and
Come on,
passed.
Shane.
Moved and passed recommendation. Our next
Thanks, guys.
Board Bill number 57.
Good afternoon, Alderman, Alderwoman. I'm Robert Salarino. I'm the Airport Properties Division Manager. We're requesting your approval today for the board bill for a shared ride shuttle concession agreement with Airport Best Taxi Service, LLC. This concession provides transportation to prearranged groups of travelers. They work with conventions and other visiting groups, and they work with the CVC quite a bit as well to arrange transportation.
It's called Explore St. Louis now.
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry, with Explore St. Louis. And the premises we give them as part of this, there's 2 booths. There's a 1,100 square feet in Terminal 1 and 80 square feet in Terminal 2, and that's where they manage their operation. The term of this agreement is 5 years, beginning July 1st, 2019, and ending June 30th, 2024. Either party may cancel this agreement upon 90 days' notice. There was a competitive bid process with bids due in March 2019, and 1 bid was received. ACDBE utilization on this, the Airport Concession Disadvantaged Business Enterprise, is 100%. Airport Best Taxi Service LLC is a certified ACDBE. Revenue to the airport will be just the percentage fee, which ranges from contract year 1, 9.5%, to contract year 5 at 11% of their gross receipts. We respectfully request your approval of this shared ride shuttle concession agreement.
All right, let's see, for questions, Alderman Vaughn?
Sure. Can you translate those percentages in dollars?
Yes, sir. I mean, depending on on their gross receipts, of course. I mean, the gross receipt in 2018 for the current provider, which was another Best Transportation, was about $742,000. Under the 9.5%, if that gross receipt holds true in the next, it'll be about $70,582 in revenue to the airport.
Okay. And say again, who had the contract? Who has it currently?
Airport Best Transportation. They operate under the Go Best name, which is separate from Airport Best Taxi Services LLC, completely separate company.
And you say you only received one bid?
Yes, from the provider now. The Airport Best Taxi Service LLC was the only
Any
bidder.
particular reason why the current provider did not bid?
Right. They've seen a decline in their revenue as a result of transportation networks coming into play. And so typically, this sets up larger groups where you've got maybe 8 or 10 people traveling, and they, rather than get 2 separate taxis or maybe 2 separate Ubers, you'll see them take that. But they also used to handle a lot of 2 or 3 individuals, and you just see more and more people morphing into transportation network companies. So there is still a niche for this. We knew they were not going to rebid. They had indicated to us that they were choosing not to rebid on it. But we still felt that it was a service that we wanted to have and available to the consumers who like to book it ahead of time and may have a group. So we put it out to see what
Right.
interest was there.
And if I may piggyback on that answer, one of the we did a number of things when we looked at this concession to adjust the requirements to try to attract bidders, and success in attracting the one bidder. Usually, most of our concessions have a minimum annual guarantee versus a percentage fee. We removed the minimum annual guarantee requirement from this, so there's only the percentage fee that the concessionaire will pay. We eased up on some of the operational requirements for booth staffing and things like that. We wanted that to be more as needed and to operate with their customer base and what they're expecting in their reservations. And we also reduced some things like the bond requirement is down to $10,000 for the payment and performance bond. So some things like that to make it more attractive to an operation in a smaller business.
A customer can't walk up and say, like a taxi or like a TNC, they have to actually book a reservation for
Right.
this. So we want to make sure that we're being fair to all entities at the airport that operate as a ground transportation provider.
It sounds like you went out your way to create more competition for this bid, but you only got one.
Yeah.
How many vendors do we have that locally that probably could participate?
You know, it's kind of a specialty niche because you do have taxis and you have TNCs, and then you do have shuttles, like for instance in Columbia you have the Tiger Shuttle, which is a shuttle bus. If you arrive in St. Louis and you're going to Columbia, Missouri, most people will book the Tiger Shuttle out of Columbia to pick you up. So this is a limited niche, and if you look at when the prior concession was there, Best Transportation, I think when we got that bid, they were the only bidder.
They were the
not?
only bidder as
Yeah.
well on that. And this historically has been a difficult concession. Even before the advent of
Yeah.
TNCs, we haven't seen a lot of bidders on this. It can be a pretty, we did what we could to reduce a lot of the requirements. But one of the things is, it is an investment. Vans and those kind of service, that isn't an expense. And the lease agreements and everything else that they have.
Which is why we did the 5-year, because we felt
Yeah.
if someone was gonna have to make an investment, and it's not just one van you have to have multiple ones.
Right.
So we, instead of doing what would normally be a 3-year concession in a lot of cases, we did a 5-year concession so that they could amortize that investment over a longer period.
Last question. I know a lot of government regulations on procurement, one bidder is almost unacceptable. What kind of what do you have to do to convince the FFA or whoever that, you know, it is what it is?
Yeah.
How you have to do you have to justify that?
Well, in the case, we issued the RFP, we obviously post it, we hold meetings, we always do open bid meetings so people can come. And I think there were a couple of people that came.
There were the current provider came,
Right.
and this company came, and we send it out to, you know, a number of the companies
Yeah.
we think might be able to do this. So it's an open process. It's a process that this time, you know, even started a year before, just sort of trying to see take the temperature of different companies in St. Louis to see if they were interested. So it's an ongoing public process.
And we do set, because this is a concession, we work with the federal program to set the ACDBE participation. In this case, it's 100% because it is a minority company.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions.
So, Alderman Vaccaro?
Nothing really other than, isn't the taxi commission still part of any of this stuff or no?
The taxi commission still exists, but they regulate the taxis. This is not a taxi service, it's a shuttle service, so they're not part of this.
Okay, no, I'm just curious.
That's correct.
Yeah.
All right, sir. Alderman Cohen?
No questions.
Alderman Oldenburg?
Just real quick for my own curiosity, are the hotel and rental car shuttles under separate contracts? How does that arrangement work?
Yeah, the rental car shuttles are under the rental car concession agreement. We have currently,
Okay.
I believe, 7 concessions for rental cars.
Okay.
And then we also have hotel and motel shuttles under ground transportation permits.
Got it.
And those are subject to ordinance, the ground transportation ordinance that comes before the committee.
And they all pay.
They all pay, absolutely.
Good. All right, excellent. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, I have no additional questions, so I'll accept the motion.
Well, then I'll make a motion with pass board bill 57 out with the due pass.
Second.
Previous roll.
Moved in second, previous roll, board bill number 57 has been approved with a due pass recommendation.
I would like to ask one thing, Chairwoman.
Yes, ma'am.
I know it's been asked of us because there are some new members to try and put together an airport tour. So we would like to, perhaps at your meeting next week, if you could ask for dates. Once we get past the 4th of July holiday, and we've got the refunding done, and we've got all of these other projects now starting,
Okay.
I think we can find the time to work that out. So if you could ask your committee members, maybe at the meeting next week, what dates may be applicable, or either send out,
Okay.
then we'll try to work around those. So anytime, once we get past, you know, starting that July, what is that, the 8th or whatever that Monday
Right.
is, then we'll be open to try and accommodate.
That would be very helpful. Okay, we'll do that. Okay.
Okay.
All right. And can you possibly ask, like we did the last time, somebody from FAA to speak with us for a few minutes?
Sure, I'll see if they
That
can
was
come
very
in.
helpful.
Okay, I can do
Okay.
that. I did have, Mr. Payne also asked if perhaps he could attend one, and I told him that would be fine. I'll let him know when it's scheduled.
Yeah,
So-
okay.
We would open it up there as well.
That'd be good.
Rhonda, do you have a email blast list for your airport commission meetings?
Do I have a distribution, like,
Yeah.
yes.
Can you add me to it, please?
I guess we can. I think so. I think so.
Just email, right?
Okay, and that would be, typically, we email them we send the package out, but we also email it, so you would see the email come forward that would have the commission package for, matter of fact, it should go out today. So if we,
Also add me to that.
Well, you might as well add the whole committee.
That way I
okay,
get
we'll
the
do that,
package.
we'll add the Transportation and Commerce Committee to that email. Just, you want to give it to Kathy? Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
All right. Any other business?
Thank you.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Motion to
Second.
adjourn. Move to second, all those are in favor?
I see you later.
Okey-dokey.